Hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar. We're very happy you could join us today. My name is Brianna Humphreys and I am the Marketing Manager for K-12 Education Products at Brooks Publishing. Before we get started today, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. You will be muted for the webinar, but if you have any questions during the presentation, please go ahead and type them into the question box, and we'll be sure to take these questions after the presentation during the Q&A portion. For today's presentation, you might want to minimize the GoToWebinar bar on your monitor so you can see more on your screen. You can do that by clicking the orange button with the arrow in the top corner of your control bar. If you need to enlarge the bar again to ask a question, you can do so by clicking that orange button again. If you have any audio issues at any point during today's presentation, you can switch to phone by clicking in the audio section of the webinar panel and using the dial-in information provided. We are recording today's webinar, so everyone who registered for the event will receive a link to the recording in a follow-up email tomorrow. We at Brooks are really excited to share that this fall we will be adding the reset process to our list of publications. At the heart of this essential guidebook lies a revolutionary approach to trauma and the children who experience it. Dyane Carrere and Wynn Kinder educate today's teachers and school leaders about the ways that trauma shows up in the classroom and its impacts on learning, behavior, development, and relationships. With this foundation, readers learn about the reset process, a structured yet flexible series of steps for addressing challenging behavior. This trauma-informed process and related strategies help ease the impacts of trauma, thereby improving behavior as well as social and academic outcomes. Be sure to visit the website up on your screen to sign up for updates about the book, and you can receive a special discount later this year when it gets a little closer to the publication date. I am happy to announce that today we are giving away 3 free copies of the reset process. So winners will be randomly selected from today's live attendees and notified by email after the webinar. We'll let you know later this year when the book publishes, but you will be receiving a free copy of the book this fall. So today's webinar is in self-care in the era of COVID-19. We're very happy to have Dyane Carrere here with us today to cover this important topic. Dyane's more than 40-year career in education has taken many forms: teacher, administrator, adjunct faculty member, consultant, and staff developer. Throughout this time, her work has concentrated on supporting students whose struggles have placed them at the fringes of school success. During the last 15 years of her career, Dyane has focused on supporting schools in understanding trauma and developing practices that support students with trauma histories. She has shared this work with others through local, state, and national forums. Dyane believes that educators and students with whom she has had the opportunity to learn from and with have been the greatest gifts of her professional life. They have profoundly informed her work through their insights, their intentions, their feedback, and their stories. Without further ado, Dyane, thank you so much for being here today, and let's go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Brianna, and thank you to all of you who've taken time to join us today in the webinar. I want to begin by acknowledging that everybody's experience in this time is extremely unique. And when we think about our experiences, they're kind of based on a balance between the demands of our life and our resources. And right now, the demands are unique and unusual in many ways. So when demands overwhelm our internal resources, we are at risk for kind of tipping off balance and not being the people that we normally are. Many times when we think about self-care in this time, many times we think about self-care as reducing demands. How do we adjust those demands? But today I'm going to focus on the other part of the equation, which is how do we build up some of those emotional resources so we're strong enough to hold up to the demands and we minimize the times that we feel like we've tipped out of balance. There's certainly so many different strategies around self-care out there. I encourage you to think about finding the ones that really resonate with you, that fit with your life. Don't try to impose something that doesn't feel natural for you. So I hope to contribute to a bank of strategies that you may have and have you consider them as one way maybe to balance your life during these tough times. In our time together today, I'm going to focus particularly on those self-care things that are focused on calming the neurological systems. So we'll look at predictability, the idea of a pause, connectedness, and good sleep. So, predictability. At a time when so little seems sure, when we have so many things that feel out of our control, we have an intense need for predictability. We need predictability all the time in our lives, but the need for it goes up during times like this. Okay, so when I say build in predictability, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? I wish I could hear you, but I can't, so I'm going to just guess. But I'm going to guess based on a lot of years of asking people what they feel they need in order to make life a little more predictable, and that is create a schedule. So indeed, having a schedule out in front of us is really important. It kind of gives us the steps and along the way to help us make our brain kind of know what's happening, and it makes our brain happy. But having a schedule can also become something that is too rigid and is counterproductive. If we think about schedules as analogous to a pilot having a flight plan, we also have to be prepared for times that, in times of turbulence, we take a little bit different route. We make a change to our schedule. So if we have a schedule that is flexible and we have some fluidity to it, it allows us to have the predictability that our brain likes, but also the flexibility that allows us to be responsive to our current emotional status. So when we're not feeling particularly well, if we can take a pause in that schedule and change that schedule so that we meet those immediate needs, we're ultimately going to get to our destination, and we're going to get there feeling a lot better, much more mentally healthy. When we create a schedule, we want to think about timeframes and events, but we also want to be ready to shift those timeframes, add things, delete things, so we can move through the turbulent times and get to the other side. If you can pay attention to your personal cues that tell you that some early turbulence is happening and that you might need to take a moment to resettle your system. Think about what you notice about your body and brain when you're starting to feel frazzled, and then try to jump out ahead of time and engage in a self-care activity. Another element of predictability comes from the positive emotions surrounding comforting rituals and activities. If you're juggling more than ever, whether you're working remotely and having to take care of kids, or doing homeschooling, or you're going out to an essential job and having to do some special disinfecting or safety protocols, you're probably thinking, I can't add one more thing to my schedule that already exists and is already kind of exploding. I want you to think about these comforting rituals and activities as little things that renew your spirit and that you can put in that schedule without necessarily taking up a lot of time. So perhaps you listen to favorite music on your way to work if you have to go into work, rather than listening to the news. You have a cup of tea during a Zoom meeting. You take a hot shower while your children at home have more than the usual amount of screen time. Keep on saying to my own daughters, it's okay that they have a little more screen time right now, because you've got a lot on your shoulders, and a little break is going to be okay. If you do have the children in your care, you can also build those kinds of comforting rituals and activities into their schedules that are going to help them have that positive affect and be able to predict. So if I'm reading a story I'm familiar with, that makes me feel better. If you do cuddling or a daily knock-knock joke with older kids, playing a favorite game, doing a family dance party or a yoga routine, even preparing and eating comfort food, are all things that are going to help your kiddos get through this as well. When we do this for children in our care, then we're also benefiting ourselves. It's good for them, but it's also resettling our systems and helping our systems come to calm. The bottom line about predictability really is make a schedule and then populate it with deliberate moments of comforting ritual. Know that many short minutes, many short moments are going to do you better. So I would rather have lots of nice little rituals planted throughout the day than save up to the end of the day, because it's just like that pilot making the route around the turbulence. If we do that a lot, we stay on course. If we attend to our inner turbulence on a routine basis. The second strategy I wanted to share with you today is about engaging in an effective pause. So what is an effective pause compared to just a pause? Good pauses are things that you can do right where you are. You don't have to get up and do them. That helps with the whole timing thing. So they need to be able to happen in front of your computer. They need to be happening in a room with other people. They need to be things that you can do in your car before you put on that mask and go out into this strange new world of ours. They are also things that should be short in their time frame. In fact, the more you're juggling, the more you need pauses. The more compressed and intense your schedule is, the more you need to build in these pauses. So they need to be short or you won't do them. You'll give up on them. So think short and frequent rather than long and rare. The pause should also fit in with how the brain settles. So lots of us are familiar with the idea of take a deep breath. And that is a good pause. And that works in times where stress isn't incredibly high. And it still works even when it is high, but it doesn't do everything that we could do to help settle our bodies. So when we take a deep breath, we get the advantage of stimulating our vagus nerve, which calms our body. We get more oxygen to our brain, which helps us think better. Those are all good things, but they may not be sufficient in order to really truly settle our body, particularly if we're feeling highly stressed. It was this missing link that led me to develop the reset process, which is what I did for children with trauma when their systems were particularly dysregulated in their school settings. But now, with everything that's going on around us, I've adapted that process for broader use with many of us experiencing the high levels of stress in these uncertain times. This process is designed to reset your physiological system, your neurological system, and thereby improve your ability to cope and to get through all these things that we're trying to figure out on a day-to-day basis. So let me show you what this looks like. The first couple of steps are really focused in on big muscle movement. This kind of movement is the most efficient way to burn off the stress chemicals that lurk in our brains and bodies. So we're going to do gross motor movements, and we're also going to do certain kinds of gross motor movements. I recommend these certain types that include deep pressure in our shoulders and our hips, because they actually introduce calming chemicals like dopamine into our system. So we're burning off the stress chemicals and we're introducing more calming chemicals. You see some of the activities that you might do on your screen: 10 marches in place, 10 big arm circles, 10 chair push-ups. I actually have used 10 car seat push-ups where I put my hands next to my thighs and just lift my body off the chair repeatedly about 10 times before I go to the grocery store once every 2 weeks or so now. I also recommend that we really look at movement that is large and patterned, because that patterned movement, that routine movement, the counting to 10 is important, because that also is something that the brain likes and settles with. So think about things that are movements that are comfortable to you, that work with your body and how it works in general and how it expresses your dysregulation, and do those and do them to account and do them in a pattern. From there, once you do that, and we're really only talking about 10 of one of those things, we then move to transition to a more settling kind of gross motor movement. So we're still talking about large motor, but now we're going to do them more calmly and more of a position that's held. This is more focusing on control. There, we might do things like smaller arm circles. We might hold ourselves in a yoga position. We might hold on to cans and raise them above our head, but in a much more slow stretch than we would have done in step one. That control movement is beginning to bring your body back to the place where you can start focusing on more internal kinds of processes. So you might pause at this point and tune into one of your senses. So if you're in a car, and one of the things I like to do too is I might hold my arms for the step 2 above the steering wheel, about 2 inches above the steering wheel, and just hold them there for a count of 10. So that would be step 2, it's holding in place. Then I just quiet myself and just pay attention to what I see. So I tune into my visual sense. You could also pick up an object and look at it and look at its weight, its texture, those sorts of things. Really analyze that object, pay attention to it. That's that sort of being present thing that helps. We do that for just about 20 seconds. We then move on to that breath that we many times think about as a pause. And I want to talk a little bit about that breath so that we're getting the very most from it. When we take a breath, we want to do it to a count, and we want to think about perhaps five count in and about 8 count out, always emphasizing that exhalation. Why is this kind of breath more calming? Let me explain. I want you to think about when you get startled. When you get startled, what happens to your breath? We usually go, we suck it in, right? And that isn't activating, that's poisoning us for action. We want to not activate what is already an overactive system, overactive because of stress. What we want to do is take a nice slow breath in, and then we want to let a long, slow breath out. Think about when you've gone through a really long day and you get to the end of it and you get to put your feet up. You sort of have that deep exhalation of relief. That's what we want to feel. We want to get to that ah. So that is a more productive kind of breath to have. Once you've done that and you do it about 3 times, then you're ready to move on to the final steps, which is now we're kind of coming back in tune with the world around us. So you want to do a simple mental task. What does that mean? One of my favorites isn't listed on here, actually. I like to think of synonyms for a word. So synonyms for the word large, and I try to see if I can list 10. There's some other examples here. What are the different words for bodies of water? Can you skip count if you like to do math things? Think of 6 words you know in a different language. Name artists that you know. Anything that is a simple mental task. What this is about is that when our brain gets stressed, the sugars that allow our thinking brain to function drop from our cognitive regions into the core of our brain. What we're doing is actually inviting through simple mental tasks, nothing too challenging, nothing too emotional. We're inviting those sugars to be brought back up to our cortex and allow us to begin thinking again, but we're doing it in a gentle way. Finally, in the final step, we're going to refocus on what we need to do next. But I would encourage you to think about what's the first step before you move. What's the first step of what I need to do next? And that's now making the shift from the pause to your life, the rest of your life. All of this together, all 6 steps, should take no more than 2 to 3 minutes. And for some of you, it might take a little less. Describing it actually takes a lot longer than actually doing it. You might be thinking, what do I do when there are other people around and I'm taking this pause, even if it is short? I would really encourage you to invite those people into the process of the pause as well. Maybe it's not the optimal time. Maybe their body isn't super stressed at that time. Their brain isn't super stressed. But still, going through this process teaches us a habit of mind of settling. So it's going to be good for them for that reason. If you're involved with whether it's a coworker who's 6 feet or more away, or children, or a significant other, another benefit, particularly for the first 2 steps when we're doing gross motor activities, is if we have someone work in parallel to us, there's something called synchronicity. And research shows that when we're synchronous in our movement with others, it actually enhances our social bonding with them. And at this time when some of our relationships, the limited relationships that we're in physical proximity with, are becoming perhaps a bit frayed from intensity, we may want to consider things like, a little extra bonding could be a good thing to help heal some of those frayed nerves. Then I like to talk about connectedness. So connectedness we could talk about forever, but I want to point out just a couple that are important right now. Smiles and laughter help us feel connected. They let our brain be flooded with positive chemicals and help really heal us. So do those fun texts with people, connect with them by phone. But I would really encourage that as much as possible, we do face-to-face with folks. If we can use the technology, if we can do those things we see folks doing of standing outside of windows, that when we see people's face, we experience it not just over the line, but really experience that expression, and that's going to help. I also think that when we can use technology in order to provide solace to others, when we talk about difficult things with one another, to see each other's faces. We can hear solace in voices, but when we see each other's faces, we see micro and macro messages of consolation. And that's so important in the healing. Actually, seeing consolation helps us heal, helps us do better. In terms of service, I want to think about service in a super broad way right now. When we do service, if we think about it as anything that is a little kindness, and if you can do bigger ones, fine, but anything that is a little kindness that contributes to the safety and well-being of others, that's going to help them, but it also is helping you. We know there's a lot of research on gratitude as being a very healing process. So whether you're making masks or for people working in food pantries, making calls to people, dropping postcards to students, really thanking people who are out there and keeping the nation moving, advocating, or just doing a special favor for someone in your own little social cohort, doing those things is so very important right now for you and for the people who are the recipients of that. Finally, gratitude. And gratitude is kind of a kindness to yourself when you sit and pause and be grateful. It changes your biochemistry. And we can do gratitude things with each other. We can make it a ritual where we talk about it, or we can do it on our own, or we can do it remotely. But taking that time is really important. And gratitude is going to tie in with sleep. We're going to just touch on next. So we know that there are 3 elements of good sleep: quantity, consistency, and quality. And the CDC recommends 7 to 9 hours a night. And I know a lot of people are having a hard time getting that right now. There's just so much more happening for them. But if you could do 7 hours a night and do it consistently, so the brain likes to wake up and go to bed at the same time. It functions better if we do that. So if I'd rather see someone have 7 hours where they're going to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time than more that is inconsistent. Finally, there's the concept of quality and what that is. We really want to make sure that we pay attention to reducing disruptions. So if you need to have your phone near you while you're asleep, I would recommend that you turn all the notifications off and only have where it rings if it's essential. It's so important that we stay away from our phone buzzing or lighting up, because even if you don't think it's waking you up, it actually is. It's pulling you up out of a deeper sleep state and awakening you and making the quality of your sleep go down. So put the phone upside down, cover it with something, watch what you're using your notifications for, and get better quality sleep. But before we leave the concept of quality, I want to address another thing that happens a lot around our sleep. And that is, if we allow a lot of negative things to happen right before we go to bed, we're going to carry that into our sleep. So I'm going to suggest you not watch late news. I think that's often very distressing for the system, and then our brain continues to process it as we try to sleep. Anything that we take in right before sleep impacts us. So think about, maybe this is the time to do the gratitude piece. And with our kids, one of the rituals I like to do and suggest that people do is, what are 3 good things? 3 good things before you go to bed. Tell me about those, because that's then what we carry into our sleep. And just as human beings, one of the things we tend to do is, as we go through our day, we become more emotional. So let's put a very positive emotion right before we go to sleep. So some of these things, you might be there thinking, oh my gosh, so many of these strategies are just too small, too simple to really make a difference. But as human beings, I can assure you, it is more often the little things that end up really being the big things for us that carry us through. And so as you think about your self-care plan, think about what little things, small little things throughout the day will help you stay more in balance for yourself and for the other people who depend on you. If you're interested, there's more information through my website, and I think we're going to be shifting to questions at this point.
Thanks, Diane, for a great presentation. That was a bunch of really helpful strategies that you shared. So we are starting to get a bunch of questions. So if anybody has additional questions, feel free to add them to the pane now. So the first one we're going to start with, somebody has shared that they are trying to find additional ways to support students and staff during these trying times. Do you have any additional supports or ideas for teenagers and adults, in
Okay.
addition to the strategies you shared today?
Okay. I think one of the things that the routine, and particularly for a lot of teenagers, we've found in working with adolescents that this whole idea of resetting, if it fits with the kinds of activities they like to do, they're very engaged in it. So when we talk about those gross motor things, maybe if they're into weightlifting, doing kettlebells, what are the things if they're into dance, maybe holding a position? One of the things I would encourage them not to do is just do random movements if they're really trying to reset. But the more we can get and encourage kids to move, whether it's if they're in a tight location and they don't have access to safe outdoors, they need to figure out how to do it inside, but more movement is going to be better. We tend to get more placid, we sit more when we feel nested in. And it's very easy to get in that habit of not moving. And if we think about our routine life, there's a lot of movement built in that we don't even think about. Kids are changing classes and doing all those sorts of things and getting movement through their classes. So we really want to encourage them to figure out how to create movement. And maybe that's something we schedule in. But I would teach kids this adapted reset process, because if they're feeling themselves, I was watching a young man who had made a video about how overwhelmed he was with the schoolwork that he was needing to do remotely. And I wanted to just say, oh, take a break and get up and move and do something that feels good. Do a joyful ritual. And maybe it's just doing a silly dance that you love to do and then sit back down. But needing to break up that sitting down and that sort of that sense of aloneness and lack of joy.
Thank you so much for those strategies. Another question we've received is, how can we continue self-caring with increased demands and workload right now?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I think is don't think that you need to do big strategies, and that's my biggest message. Think small. Back to that airline thing. If we don't have to veer off and do something very different, we need to just take a small thing, do it, and get back to work, because we're going to just get more behind, and if we get more behind, we're going to feel more stressed. So rather than taking a 25-minute breaks, maybe a 5-minute break is all you need, or a 2-minute break. And sometimes maybe that simple breath is all you need too. Yeah, keep it short and sweet, and it will make a difference if you do it throughout your time.
Great. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so I think we have time for maybe one more question today, and then we can follow up with people offline separately.
Okay.
Someone has asked, once we return to teaching school, how can we make sure that students are reset and ready to return to normalcy?
Okay. Schools are so good at creating predictability. I think it's one of the reasons after any kind of stressful period, one of the first things that nations do is they try to get kids back to school. Having a routine, but maybe taking the temperature of how your students are feeling. So having some way, I'll borrow from some other folks who are doing regulation kinds of things. If you have kids just come in and mark how they're feeling, are they feeling focused, or are they feeling unfocused? Are they feeling very busy-bodied, or are they feeling calm? Having some way that's appropriate for the language that you use with your students, their developmental age, but having some way that they can share it. And then if you know that there are kids, or a large number of kids, that need to reset, engage in this process with them, have them participate in it and help them settle, or help them have them create one, which gives them some control back after feeling they've gone through a period of such loss of control. Create together a very familiar routine that you do to help settle back in. But I think taking the pulse of the students, checking in with them is really important. And then, just like I was talking about with the schedule, don't shoe peg yourself too tightly into it, and allow yourself a shift so that you can take a break with those kids. But again, a break that's very small, and put it in through the day as you're noticing different things. I think having conversations with students about what their indicators are that they're feeling restless, and being able to express that in appropriate ways to their adult teachers and paraprofessionals and other people is a really healthy skill to develop in them. And don't expect too much too soon of yourself or your students. Allow it to kind of come back over time. And that's a decision you're gonna have to make based on how your kids are doing.
That's a wonderful response and a lot of really good nuggets in there. So
Oh,
thank you
good.
so much for sharing that insight with us.
Thanks, Brianna.
Um, Thanks. So I think just again to be respectful of people's time, we're gonna just finish the Q&A portion for today. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch off my webcam, um, and we'll just wrap up here briefly. So I just want to remind everybody that Diane's book, The Reset Process, will be available this fall, and be sure to check the slides that were shared today, as well as the handout in the handouts pane for more updates on our website. For those who are interested, Brooks Publishing is offering a 20% discount on all of our products from now until the end of June. So if that's helpful for anyone who's looking for additional resources, we are more than happy to share that with you. So at checkout, just be sure to use code COFFEETALK, COFFEETALK, and you can receive that discount. If you are looking for additional professional development webinar opportunities, be sure to check out the Brooks Publishing website for the latest additions to our Coffee Chat series. And also check out the Brooks Publishing website if you're looking for additional resources during these times. So we do have a collection of recommended reading, downloadable resources, and professional development webinars from Brooks and other leading organizations. So on behalf of Brooks, thank you so much to everyone who attended our webinar today, and thank you so very much to Dyane Carrere for a great webinar.
Thanks for having me. Take care, everybody.